It is the Anfield Wrap. It's Neil Atkinson, joined by Mo Stewart, by Josh Williams and by Ian Ryan, to do a show that's sort of in three parts. They are interrelated. We're going to start off with a bit of a transfer roundup of matters pertaining to Liverpool. Then we're going to have a bit of a chat about the Euros and how to live it. And then from there, we're also then going to talk about what other clubs are up to and try to get a sense of what the market actually is. It's quite complicated and difficult stuff at the minute. No one quite knows what's what or what's where, and there's lots of extraneous factors, not least the distraction of the Euros. But we will get stuck right in. We'll start off talking about forwards, not least because Josh Williams on his Substack, which you can find called Distance Covered, has been whittling them down in such a way which means he gets text messages from me, which don't bode well, it's worth saying. It's predominantly right-hand side of forward stuff. Before I bring Josh in, Ian, there's been noises for both Liverpool and for a number of sides about players in this position. Elise release club clauses around Champions League clubs. Bakayoko, reports of a release as well, have been doing the rounds. He's been linked with a number of people. Minter last week, 10 minutes or so of general chatting about him. Somerville today getting thrown out there for Liverpool. To me, it sort of feels a little bit like Liverpool have put feelers out. I wouldn't necessarily go beyond that, but at this point in time, it does feel like it wouldn't surprise me if you found out in a few months Liverpool practically had their list of lads for the right hand side and rang everyone's agents and said what's what.
Yeah, I mean, those lads you've mentioned there, you can believe that they're all on a list. I mean, they're all a similar age profile as well, so they're all around about 21, 22. I think if you were asking me right now which one kind of takes my fancy, it would be Elise, mainly because I've seen him more than the other lads. I think the point around his injuries might be one of concern. I think he plays in about 19 games last season, but does get 10 goals and 6 assists. So you can already kind of see and smell it that he's on this trajectory now where I think he's about to go big if someone can keep him fit. But even in those 19 games, I think he plays just under 1,300 minutes, so they're not full 90s. So there definitely is an issue. But because he is looking like he's coming to the boil, I do think some of the bigger teams now are going to be sniffing around him. As I say, he's 22 years of age. He looks like he's got a lot. He can play on that right-hand side, as you said, but I think he's a bit more flexible than just playing on the right-hand side. And if Liverpool are considering what the next step is for Mohamed Salah, we can all sit here right now and say, should they keep him, should they sell him? Maybe because of the age thing, but if they are going to do something with him, i.e. shift him more central into maybe a number 10 or a number 9 position, then I think someone like Elise would get fans excited.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, just from the point of view of putting the feelers out, essentially there's a new group that's come in. So as a new sporting director, the whole recruitment team is new. So they're sitting down and going, okay lads, what's on our to-do list? All right, all these new contracts. Oh, Mohamed Salah, what are we going to do about that? Okay, what do we do if he says no? Here's the list of people. Yeah. So that's probably where the feelers are coming out from. So even just from a point of view of we have to explore every option, even if they still want to say we're still hoping to try and tie him down to a new contract. The players...
But you're indicating there that there's a universe where if he doesn't get tied down to a new contract, he gets sold.
Yes. I know that you don't agree with that, and I know that...
No, I'm just... but what I'm saying there is that Salah gets to decide that and the club doesn't.
Yes, this is the well.
He wants to send off, doesn't he? Wants to send off in 2025.
Yeah, well, I mean, I dare say he probably looked at the trajectory of Jordan Henderson and he thinks I don't actually want that. So maybe that's the case. I think, yeah, obviously selling him is a difficult one because it requires someone who he would actually want to go to coming in with a bid that Liverpool would actually want to take, and the chances of that at the moment are very slim. But anyway, I digress. I think Ian's point about Elise and his lack of 90s is kind of fascinating because I think it might be one of those where it chimes with what Liverpool want, but it doesn't necessarily chime with what the player wants. I think he's looking to go somewhere who's going to be playing in Europe and he's going to want to be the main guy. But the reality is that if he can't stay on the pitch that long enough, we might be having to say, well, look, you're not going to be able to play all the games you want, but if you're going to be playing alongside someone like Salah, who's going to be playing sometimes outright, sometimes in the middle, then between the two of you, you can maybe hold down that position. That feels a little bit more likely from a Liverpool perspective.
You ran the list of wide forwards in general, not just right-hand-sided ones, Josh. One of the things that did hit me as you were whittling through was one of the things that you end up looking for as well is an availability question in terms of them sort of getting on the pitch. Because to me, the most obvious candidate, if you're going to look at Elise, you throw back open the notion of Neto, who to me I think would fit both the idea of what Liverpool look for in general, but also the way Slot's played. Because he is such a pure winger. It's worth pointing out in the way in which he goes about his business. But this is the difficult thing. Players in those positions, they often do come with some availability question marks, and Liverpool have got to balance all of this out. I mentioned Bakayoko before as well. You know, there's a lot for Liverpool to balance out, I think, in this conversation. I don't think it's that straightforward, and that's even before you throw open the Salah questions, which I think are complicated.
Yeah, well, the Elise thing is interesting because all the points so far are right in terms of an availability thing, and I had the perception that he's not typically available that much. But if you look at the season before last, he started 37 out of 38 in the Premier League. I really did not pick up on that, but he did. You know, so that's heavy availability. Whereas I think, in comparison to Neto, he's had one season, I think, in his career where he started more than 18 games in a league season. And that was 2020 to 2021. Beyond that, nothing. You know, it's 18 starts max. For a bit of perspective on that, Brian Mbeumo has done that 5 years in a row.
Until this season.
More than 18 starts. No, I think he's done it this season.
He got back in time, okay.
Yeah. So he's got heavy availability. Andy Gordon showed up as the player who played the most last season in my little analysis thing, but I have covered every forward under the sun. I feel like I've done my own work, so ask me anyone, mate, and I'll answer. But I think Elise, I don't think it'll be him. I don't think it'll be Elise. I think he's a good player, but just looking at him, at his profile and his contract especially, I just think it's a big deal. I think it's a Chelsea deal or a City deal or a United deal, because he's already on £100,000 a week.
More than that was reported, so yeah, he's on a lot of money already.
Yeah, so if you get him in, you're going a fair bit higher than that. You're giving him the pay rise.
What I couldn't believe when you pulled it all through, reading some of the stuff, and it's very much worth reading, by the way, is the amount of money Nico Williams is on. That was the one that absolutely got me. Nico Williams, who's got the release clause at Bilbao, so it's a low release clause, but he's on upwards of 160,000 a week already at his age at this stage.
I think for me it's the same reason though, essentially, because they've had to try and stop him leaving once, and they've kept him, and they've got him to sign a new deal in order to do that, and part of that new deal was a lot of money. The same thing that Palace did with Elise last summer when Chelsea activated their release clause, and everyone was like, actually, no, you don't want to go there, do you? Like,
but
stay here.
He's 21 now. 21, and he's on £200,000 a week or something like that, is what I found.
Also, the other thing with Bilbao is that they can't be as active in the market as everyone else.
Yep.
So when they've got a really good player, they do absolutely everything they can to keep hold of him.
That is true, it is fair. I think, to me, the whole thing, for me, Josh, and I'll bring everyone in, throws open Salah questions. We're going to do a show in a minute, and we've ran the numbers on the way in which Slot plays and what he asks of his right-hand side of forward, or what he asked last season at Feyenoord. He might not ask the same thing, and that's part of the vagaries of this at the minute. But effectively, his most intense presser was his right-hand sided forward. His player who carried the ball the most was his right-hand sided forward. None of that anymore. One aspect of it maybe did once, although I would argue that Mane always had the onus on him to carry it more and get Liverpool up the pitch more than Salah. None of that is Mo Salah at this point in time, and that to me is why I think it keeps going back to a right-hand sided forward, because I think it's a potential starting berth for the right signing. Yeah,
well, I was quite surprised, to be honest, when I kind of narrowed it down to not that many options. How many of them were left-footed, to be fair? There is quite a few in there. But none of them are none of them are anywhere near Salah's level. They might work a bit harder in terms of putting a foot in a bit more, but in terms of their output, it's just not as good. The best players in the process that I found were favoured the left, like an Anthony Gordon or a...
We'd all sign Anthony Gordon, Josh.
Yeah. I'm sure Edwards would as well.
I'd buy him twice to make the point.
Do you reckon that's a goer?
I hope it is.
Do you think there's anything in it though?
I think what Liverpool have got,
it'd be brilliant.
I think the problem Liverpool have got now is, I think that there's until there's certainty, and this goes for every club, by the way, so it's not just Liverpool. Until there's certainty on the outs, and I think specifically on this one, Diaz, I don't think Liverpool are going to be looking for more than one. I think Liverpool, it seems clear, are prepared to buy one forward, but unless someone's going to move on, I don't think there's room for a second one. And everyone's got contracts and everyone's getting somewhere, so I don't quite see a world where Liverpool buy for the left unless they're plan is to move Diaz to the right, but he does like an inverted winger and Diaz is right-footed. Unless that's the plan, I don't think there's a world where Liverpool are buying for the left, which unfortunately rules out one of the greatest living Liverpudlians in Tony Gordon.
The only thing with Anthony Gordon, though, I think he can play different spots, though. He's played as a 10 for Eddie Howe, he's played as a centre forward, he's played on the right.
He played for the under-21s when he won that tournament. He played straight through the middle.
Yeah.
I know it's a different level and it's a step up when you come into the Premier League and stuff, but he has, to back your point up, he can do that multifaceted thing where he can play in different positions, not just the left-hand side.
Yeah, I think another one of the players in the process was bear with me on this, Kvaratskhelia.
Yeah.
Is that what I say? He was another one who showed up really well, but I think Gordon, in comparison to him, I think Gordon can play different spots. I think if you sign Kvaratskhelia, I think you play him on the left, and if you can't play him on the left, probably don't buy him. Do you know what I mean? So I think you maybe have to sell Diaz in that case. But I thought his recent agent comments were interesting. Have you seen them?
No.
Haven't you seen them?
No, go on. I've been on holiday, mate. You're going to have to get Cluey back in on everything, to be honest with you. I'd forgotten we played in red.
It was quite recent, to be fair. I think it's been in like the past 24 hours, to be honest. But it's his agent said something along the lines of like, when they're in the Champions League, he doesn't want to miss out of a year in the Champions League. It's not guaranteed that we're going to stay. You might want to move. Conte's got big plans, but it just very vague. But as in, we're interested in getting off here, basically. But I do think he's a player for the left. We already have Gakpo, Jota, and Diaz who can play over there.
And maybe Nunez.
Yeah. So it's that one feels like a bit of a long shot, but it depends on outgoings and that. But I think Liverpool are in a healthy state in terms of looking at the market and seeing other clubs struggling for PSR and things like that, and having certain unhappy players who might want to leave, and we can almost just wait and watch and poach someone who, if something comes up.
I think they do need to move one on, though. I do think there should be.
I think if they're going to buy 2 forwards, they need to move one on.
Yeah, I do think that there needs to be some churn. I think it would be. Maybe it would feel like a little bit of a gamble if you just went with the same lads again for different reasons. You know, I think there's almost question marks over all of them to some extent. I think the Salah thing remains interesting because you don't quite know where his level is, and it's all about because he's getting a little bit older. I think, you know, we'd all sit here and say he's been one of the best players that's probably ever represented the club. Certainly in terms of getting goals, his record is sensational. But is he 32 now?
Yeah. Just
and I think, listen, he's had seasons before, Salah, where he's tailed off towards the end and he's come back brilliant the following season. So you've got to be careful with some of this. But I do think there was real signs where even if Slot wasn't coming in, there was a real question mark. Do you need to move Mohamed Salah just because? I'm not sure he can give you what he was once able to give you on that right-hand side consistently over 38 games. So I'm not saying he can't do it in certain moments in certain games, but I don't think you can nail him to that position all the time. So it might be that you have to shift him.
Got loads of closing down to do, innit? And that's what the manager wants.
Well, that's it, because I think a lot of this will come back to... I think a lot of Liverpool's recruitment will come back to a number of things. Salah will be one, Trent will be another. What are they going to do with him? Where is he going to play? Playing Salah on that right-hand side doesn't really help Trent, and I think that's something they've got to think about. If they're going to play Trent full back, then they've got to think about, well, who is going to be on the right hand side, because Trent's, when he's been at his best, he has been helped out with other footballers offering a bit of a structure and a bit of a protective blanket, Henderson being the main one. So Liverpool have to make those decisions. But I think someone like a Diaz, for instance, is his output where you want it to be? Is he going to get much better? Has the injury really hampered him to the point where you think now, is he the one where you maybe move on and Gakpo can do a little bit more left hand side? Jota, it's more about injuries and just keeping him fit and stuff, and maybe Nunez, it's more of a is the quality there? Is he going to hit the kind of heights that we thought he might do? Again, I think the manager will want to have a little look at that, so I don't see him moving on, but I could certainly see Luis Diaz moving on.
I think the fixture's going to be out tomorrow, Mo, and I think they're going to tell a story when people actually engage with this. And I think that people are sort of struggling at the minute as well with the reality of what the Champions League's going to be like. Yeah. Because what you end up with is you have this season that almost comes in 3 parts. Forget August, probably, because I think they're only going to put 3 games in. I've done it, but I could be wrong. There's only 4 midweek games that they're doing across the thing. You don't want to get into this with me. Then I think ultimately then September until January the 4th will average I think, a game approximately every 4 days, unless Liverpool were to go out to the EFL Cup. The only way that'll happen realistically is if they get a top 10 side away from home. That's the only way Liverpool are going to get knocked out of the EFL Cup now, as far as I'm concerned, within reason. So they're going to average a game every 4 days. Then there's still 2 more Champions League games that happen in January. Then there's a chance that practically nothing happens in February. Like they might barely play a game from the end of January until the start of March, in a really weird way, because of when the 5th round of the Cup will be. They might get knocked out of that. The 4th round of the Cup, if they get knocked out in the 3rd round, which feels likelier than going out to the AFL Cup. I'll finish my points in a minute. Then you hit March, and unless they've come 9th to 24th in the Swiss system, they will, as I say, could be really, really light. Then you hit March, and then March until the end of the season, including an international break, you're back to a game every 4 days. So you've got this really weird thing where basically my argument here is I think they need 6 forwards. The way in which we classed it as 5 last year, I actually think you throw Elliott in that group as well, and you end up with 7, and then you've got a couple of kids. That's how many I think you're going to need, and that's not even before you get into whether or not Liverpool's forwards are injury prone. That's what I think you're going to need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because, like you say, it's such a weird configuration of the season, and that's even before you factor in who we're playing at what point.
Yeah.
Because we don't know when the league's fixture is going to fix out. We don't know if we're playing away at City first, or away at City second, away at United first, or Arsenal. And all of those things come into it.
And the Champions League, you're going to play 4 good teams, minimum. Exactly. Minimum 4 good teams. You're going to get 2 teams from pot 1, 2 teams from pot 2. That's 4 difficult games that you're guaranteed to have. Whereas in times gone by, City's group, the nearest side to them is fucking Leipzig.
Yes, and we have to remember
RB fucking Leipzig is their actual formal name now, by the way.
I mean, RB fucking Leipzig, you nearly knocked out Real Madrid. But anyway, I digress. Last season, we really benefited from the fact that we had the Europa League. So we were able to do a lot and bring a lot of players through and mix and match a little bit and still be able to keep everybody fresh and humming for the Premier League season. This season, obviously, we're not going to have that. It's going to be harder. And then you think about how we ended last season, and that is absolutely what we want to avoid. We want to avoid the crunch part of the season being our worst part, energy-wise and performance-wise.
Absolutely.
Now, how do you do that? Is it all of the changes the Slot's going to make to how we train, how we set up compared to Klopp? We're hearing a lot of noises about that's one of the things he's very good at, keeping his players fit, keeping his players available. Whether or not the changes he makes is enough, I think, and this is going to sound ridiculous because it's something that we haven't traditionally done, I think you're right to say that we might need 6 forwards. I think we might need to get one of them in January rather than getting them all in the summer. I think we might need that extra boost at that point, because if you say we're going to have a very calm February, you can bring someone in January, they have a few games to mix in with it, then we have some time to train, to learn, to adapt in February, and then go again. I think we might need that extra little bit of emphasis at that point in the season.
That's what they did with Diaz. I quite like Diaz. When I said before, I think he could go. It's mainly because I think churning the squad is good. I think you've got to keep it fresh. You've got to keep adding players, and maybe you have got a little one or two go. And I think the model that Liverpool have operated, they have always wanted to bring money in to then go and spend it. So you've got to look at where they're going to generate the cash if they want to go and do that. I do think Diaz, with the noises around him, maybe he'd be the one, because there is a lot of left-hand side options. But I also think tournament football presents a problem in terms of bringing footballers in. Now, at least he's been mentioned there. Now, at least he's not gone to the Euros. Surprisingly, he's born in England, but he's not. I don't think he's represented England yet at under 21 level. But he has represented France. But he's likely to go to the Olympics, which doesn't start until kind of the end of July. So even doing
for France or for Britain.
He's going to go for France. I think he's in Thierry Henry's provisional squad for the Olympics. So this presents a problem for clubs trying to get footballers in whilst they're in major tournaments. And you can have a conversation about whether you think football's major tournaments at the Olympics or not. But they'll take that seriously.
And if he's not been in the Euro squad, he'll almost no one can make the argument he can't go to the Olympics. If you see what I mean.
Yeah. No. So him and Mateta are both in that squad. But it feels a bit mad that he's not gone to the Euros, at least, because I think Southgate said, England have left it a little bit late. I mean, it's not like he's a surprise. He was born in England. We've known about him for a while, if you want to think about it in an England context. I'm not too particularly bothered about what England get up to in the summer, but it is odd that maybe he's not found himself in one of the international teams. But yeah, that whole thing, that whole summer football, there's obviously a Copa America as well. That's going to be difficult for clubs to navigate and negotiate around that, because footballers will have their minds focused on those tournaments.
This is why, and maybe we'll just do this as a full thing, Josh, but this is why I think trying to work the market out at the minute. You've ran the numbers that you've run and gone from there. I think with the Euros, with Copa America, the Olympics getting whacked in there as well. The PSR questions are on some clubs in England in particular. Actual money being a more of a factor than people ever give it credit for. Cash flow, all of that sort of stuff. That's one of the reasons why Everton need to sell a player. They should be PSR compliant according to Swiss Ramble today. But actual cash on hand for Everton is a massive, massive problem at the minute. And that's why United are lowballing them around Branthwaite. They literally need cash. They've got things to pay off. People paying attention to that would be no bad thing. But you can't have everything in English football. People cannot pay attention to detail. It's practically impossible. All of this, I think, makes it really hard at the minute to work out what value actually is. So Yoro could be going for 50 million. That sort of feels like value. Inacio's got a clause. He's been linked with Liverpool consistently. That's at about 50 million. As I say, United lowballed on Branthwaite. Everyone thought it was lowballing. This summer, I've got no sense as to what promising young centre-halves are going for. I think Liverpool have got to try and plough their own furrow, but that's also easier said than done, because you said before about they might want to be able to pick one off here, poach one there, have their eye on the way in which the whole thing's going.
Yeah, well, that comes back to the wait and watch thing that I've just mentioned. Like, it does feel like a lot of clubs are in a bit of a sticky situation, this summer, and we know Villa need to sell, we know Chelsea need to sell, Newcastle.
I think Villa might be alright after the Louise thing,
What about the selling there? John Duran, aren't they, to Chelsea?
There's talk that Duran might go to Chelsea, but I don't know if they need to do that. Swiss Ramble this morning was either way on that as well. They may not need to do Duran, but they might just want to. He's wanted to get off.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of situations out there though that seem to be kind of in limbo a little bit. And going back to what I said earlier, Liverpool, out of all these clubs, seem to be in a decent spot. We have got 5 relatively elite forwards there already. We have got a deep squad when everyone's fit. And we've got a new manager who wants to assess these players and train them. We've got a new sporting director who's got a few contract issues ongoing. So I am not surprised and wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool really did wait and just kind of like spot an opportunity when they emerge. Typical John Henry, to be honest, like spotting these, exploiting the market basically whenever you can. And I think this is going to be a market for that if you're sensible around it. On the Diaz thing as well, by the way, like, I have wondered, just how he would look on the right.
Yeah, me too.
Like you were speaking about Trent before, Salah not helping Trent. Diaz would help Trent a lot more. And I think one of Diaz's biggest issues for me, I don't know if I said it to you recently on the podcast, Mo, but you can give Diaz the ball in his own defensive third, right? And he'll have you in the penalty box 10 seconds later. But then he stops. He just stops, mate. Was it you? Yeah, honestly, he gets all that way. Transition and everyone's catching him up and stuff, everyone's behind him, and he just stops. Then he tries to dribble in the past 4 players and then tries to shoot, and it gets blocked every time because he's cutting inside onto his favoured foot and he's galaxy braining it. But I think if he was on the opposite side, I think he'd do more of what he did when the famous Spurs goal got ruled out, where he beats his man and immediately when he gets that separation just wellies it towards the far stick, or gets to the byline and cuts it back like a typical slot Feyenoord winger. So I would be insistent to just play with that dynamic. If you're going to get Salah away from the sides now and play him as a 9 or play him as a 10 or something, test Diaz on the right. There's loads of experiments like that for the summer, like beyond transfers, even the Trent thing as well. There's loads of internal solutions to play with as well.
And then you could buy Anthony Gordon.
Exactly, yeah, there you go.
The other thing about Diaz, I think back to the Fulham away game. And the first half an hour of that, when he was the first time I've seen him on the right for ages, he looked like he had real impetus. It looked like the Fulham defenders didn't really know how to deal with him. And he had that move where he was coming from the right into the centre. And if you think back to his first season, there was a goal away at Brighton. Well, it wasn't even a goal. It was the one where the keeper absolutely takes him out.
No, it's a goal stance.
Yeah.
He should be sent off.
Yes.
But it stands because it goes in the back of the net.
And that channel of coming from the right into the centre, moving late, seemed to be something that was really exciting and really profitable for him. And we just kind of went away from it. So I'm like you. I would like to see how he would look out there. And I don't think it's something that Slot would completely dismiss out of hand if we were looking at the left-sided forwards. In terms of the market and all those other things and Liverpool kind of waiting around, I think there is probably one exception with this whole Lenny Yoro stuff, whereby I feel like Liverpool's opportunity is to go early rather than late, because essentially he wants Real Madrid. Real Madrid think that they've got him. I mean, he was their guest at the Champions League final, which kind of means that they probably think that they've got him already. But they are sitting on their hands because as much as they can afford it, they don't have to. They're happy to wait and see what's happening with Bayern Munich and Alphonso Davies and with Ferland Mendy and whether or not he's going to sign a new contract, and let all of their other chips fall before they go into him, because they're like, well, okay, we don't have to move for him because we know that he wants to come to us. Whereas Liverpool have got a really good relationship with his agency, Gestifute, who've got Nunes and quite a few others who we've signed in the past, who are probably saying to Liverpool, look, if you go hard, you can get him, because Lille absolutely want shot. Lille have absolutely said we're gonna put this guy up for sale. I mean, they stopped him going to the Olympics in the same way that they Palace didn't with Elise, because they want him to be available for transfer. So Liverpool's kind of move here is to try and do it now, but if it's can't do it now, then probably going to kind of back off and wait.
He's only got 1 year, Euro, as well, on his contract left, so I think that probably skews the fee, even though it's a lot of money for an 18-year-old. But I think, given his potential, you'd have seen that fee maybe even higher if he'd had the longer on his contract. He signed his last one in about 22, so it's due to expire next season. But he looks an unbelievable talent. I think he can play both sides as well. So I agree with Mo. It feels like the direction of travel is very much Real Madrid, and we've all just got a cop for that. But he is someone, I think, all things being equal, Liverpool would love, because he's someone who you could bring in, not necessarily as a project, because I think maybe he's already maybe past that stage to an extent, but there will be a period of time where he'd have to learn, given his age, new league, all that. But from what I've seen, and I've only seen little bits, he looks like he's got potential to kind of be whatever he wants, to be honest, that kid.
He's one that's interesting, Josh. And I think, again, though, this is the same thing that you're saying, which is that Liverpool can pick as and when they want to move. I think this is the interesting part. I don't think the market is quite going to skew sort of in Liverpool's general direction in terms of the very, very highest level of football to the Real Madrid points as well that can be made. But I do think there is a little bit of a moment where everyone's just trying to work out where their own parameters are at the minute. I think that's the case. Even at the very highest level clubs, I think United are in a really funny position as ever, which they managed to create for themselves. Arsenal are interesting, and I don't think they can do much before the new financial year sort of kicks in properly. I think they need to get the other side of June the 30th. City are really weird. They're the Hotel California of football clubs. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave unless they want you to. It's a summer that seems, I hate the fucking Eagles, I don't know why I've done it. It's a summer that seems oddly contingent on departures, though for Manchester City in a bit of a weird way. I think there is a little bit of leeway for Liverpool to be able to pick the moments. They've just got to be smart with it, and that's been the point of the change of the structure.
Yeah, I think I feel like a lot of the market's going to depend on PSG as well. Just what obviously they've just lost Kylian Mbappe. They've always got cash on the hip to use. They historically have sent the market into chaos, So, and they are after a replacement for him. And if it's Diaz as their top target, that would make things very interesting for Liverpool. If it's Kvaratskhelia, then that means for me probably that Diaz is probably staying. So a lot of it depends on just as always with the market. It's very it's alive, isn't it? It's like a living
It feels
thing.
more alive now than to be clear, it feels less alive but with greater variance now than it had in the past. I think in the past, when it felt like, if you go back 2 seasons, say, spend, money was always going up, the big clubs had the cash, they'd lash it around, other clubs had moved. I think there's now, because of the Premier League shifts, I think there's now much more of a Loch Ness monster, if you see what I mean, in terms of the flow. You can't quite work out where it is, whereas in the past it felt more alive, but now it feels more like a snakes and ladders board. All the metaphors are everywhere.
It goes back to that was it Mike Tyson, I think, who said everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
The market can punch you in the face out of nowhere. You can have a perfect little blueprint, but this is exactly what I want to do, and then Real Madrid want your centre half, and you can't stop them from going. Or in this case, the centre half we want, Real Madrid also want him, and again they just get everyone they want, don't they? So we have to then come up with a bit of a contingency plan. So it's usually just a case of whoever copes best with that ever changing floor. It's like the floor's lava, isn't it? And just everything's moving all the time, and. But Liverpool historically, with this structure behind the scenes, with the sporting director in place and that, have made really good decisions. So it's going to be interesting to see how the market moves, because everyone seems to be really hesitant, apart from Crystal Palace.
Yeah, but on that though, Mo, to Liverpool move smart in the past, that's almost now. A lot of that is pre-COVID. it does just feel like a different era. It feels like one where you could draw your blueprint up and have a confidence in executing it. That does just seem a little bit trickier at this point than it certainly than it did do in 2019.
I think so. And there are so many different variables that are into the market now, because obviously we don't really know how much of a force Saudi are, but they are still knocking around. They are still able to put unsettle players, if not necessarily go in there and throw massive bids around, because they might not necessarily be paying big transfer fees which will make the club's eyes light up, but they'll still pay high wages that, as I say, can unsettle players. And then suddenly you've got a situation where a player that you were banking on, suddenly you can't bank on them anymore, and suddenly you've got to try and replace them. But in a market where everybody is sell first before you buy, you kind of end up in a stalemate, because someone's got to buy. Someone's got to make the first move. And we've seen in previous summers where there'll be the one big transfer which starts all the dominoes falling. Well, the big transfer this summer was Mbappe, but Paris didn't get any money out of Mbappe.
Yeah.
So that means that there's not more money for them to go around. And I take Josh's point is that they probably are going to go back into the market. However, they do technically have Bradley Barcola and Colin Muani to play up front, and Ousmane Dembele. And last season, there were times when Luis Enrique was playing them three without Mbappe and putting him on the bench to say, this is what we're doing now. This is the new year. This is the new PSG. I mean, it didn't work very well, so maybe they will have to sell one of those before they start looking. But there's no real, okay, well, that's definitely going to happen, which is going to happen this and this and that. There are lots of teams who can say, well, we might need someone, we might not need someone. Like you say with Arsenal, I'm fascinated to see what Arsenal end up doing, because for my money, they only really should be making a couple of small moves around the edges. But after coming close twice and not getting it anywhere, they're going to have itchy trigger fingers, and I wouldn't be surprised if they swing big.
But they've also got to move someone on, probably move at least a couple on. And this is the funny part about all of this, Ian, which is, I think I take the idea of there's often one big move, one domino, and then a lot of dominoes move. I almost feel as though for a lot of the clubs at the minute, they actually need that process to work the opposite way. They need to move on. A lot of the bigger clubs, I think, are in a situation where they feel like they need to move on a lot of the players who they'd normally sell lower down the food chain. For instance, Emile Smith-Rowe, no disrespect to him, looks a hell of a talented footballer, but you feel as though Arsenal could do with, in different ways, creating the room for themselves to move. But the problem is, who buys Emile Smith-Rowe? And this, I think that everyone's got to be prepared, I think, for some logjam. I think it's more, there'll be a couple of transfers that ease the flow of all of this more than the idea now, because I take Mo's general point, the big domino would be Mbappe possibly if he went for 250 million and it goes from there, but that just hasn't happened. So you're in this situation now where I think there's loads of these log jams all the way through the normal food chain, and there's all these tournaments going on, as you refer to.
Yeah, and sometimes clubs might have to be brave with some of this, and by that I mean, they might have to sell someone to get things moving that they don't really want to sell, but it then creates a bit of a spark. And I think, there's different reasons for doing that. Ferguson was notoriously the master at doing that. We would sell lads on a fairly regular basis who you'd class as big hitters, but he'd move them on because he'd think, well, actually, are they coming towards the end of their prime? They've still got stuff they can offer, but I think I can upgrade. And I think that's always a brave thing, that, because I think sometimes as fans, I've said this on other shows, we can get attached to footballers, but I'm always of the mindset that if there is a better one out there, you should be looking to do it. And that sometimes will upset people, and there's a risk and there's a gamble to it. And even Ferguson wouldn't get all of them right. He'd sold players regularly, he'd sell players regularly that would go on and still have great careers post Man United, and people will often think about maybe Stam or Hughes and Kinchelskis and people like that, but you can go back further, Strachan and Paul McGrath and people like that, and there was different reasons for selling those lads, don't get me wrong, but they went out and had really, really good careers post Man United. So sometimes you've got to be brave. Guardiola, to an extent, you could call it brave or foolish, but he lets Palmer go, and that doesn't look like a particularly great move now in terms of he's ripped it up for Chelsea. But they might have thought, well, actually, he's not going to get that many games for us, and we want to do something slightly different. And they've made the decision, and you can have a conversation about whether it's the right or wrong decision, because he's done really well since he's left. But sometimes it does take those bold and brave moves just to get things kind of moving along. So that's where I'm talking about Liverpool and their forwards. Is the one there that typically you wouldn't want to see leave through the door, but it might help them go and do something a little bit special, and up the numbers and up the quality. And as I say, they might just catch one that's on the right trajectory, that's going to end up producing big numbers. And when we talk about Elise, and he's not posting the Salah numbers, but I do think you can see signs in a Crystal Palace team with a lot more freedom. He's on this path now where he's delivering 10 goals and 6 assists in 19 games, and they're not 90s. That's really good numbers. That feels to me like he's about to go bang if you can keep him fit. Neto might have been another one, but I don't think he's quite there with the goals. Maybe more assists, but an unbelievable footballer. But these are some of the bold and brave decisions that Liverpool have got to make. And you'd have to say, the track record in terms of bringing players in and getting them on that cusp has been pretty good.
I think it's also, you talk about risk and being brave. There's different ways of that. So you might have to take a risk on a guy, like you say, like Neto, where you're hoping you can get as much value out of him for being on the pitch. But sometimes you got to take a risk and say, well, someone like a Johan Bakayoko or even a Somerville at Leeds, like, how good are Eredivisie numbers or Championship numbers in terms of being able to translate to Premier League? Because Somerville's a fascinating one for me, because he was rubbish when he was in the Premier League, and that was only 2 years ago.
Do you think he's good enough, Mo? Do you think he's the right level?
I don't know. And this is the thing. I've looked at him lots of times for Leeds this season and seen him be the best player on the pitch. But then I've watched him in other games, and notably some of the bigger games, and he hasn't looked the same. And the players around him are all the same, pretty much. So it's really just him who's the difference. And then you think about translating that to a higher threshold. We're not just playing Premier League, we're playing Champions League. You can have no games off when you're playing for Liverpool. When you're playing for Leeds United in the Championship, there's 46 games. You think to yourself, well, I can probably have a couple of games off here. We're still going to be in the top 3 of the league. You can't have that at Liverpool. And then with Bakayoko in the Eredivisie, we really don't all watch it enough to know how good the quality of all their opponents are. So you're looking at someone's numbers and you're thinking, okay, well, he's able to be productive at this stage, but how much can you rely on those being able to be translated into what we want them to be? And when I know we all kind of have fun and we chat about transfers and we all think, well, if I was them, I'll do this or do that. I'm glad I'm not having to actually make these decisions.
I think you're spot on, mate. Looking at the market, the options that are available to Liverpool and that, there's so many out there that offer like different perks in comparison to other ones. So it's difficult. Somerville, I think one thing I tried to reinforce on my Substack was this is Liverpool. Yeah. This is Liverpool, mate. You're chatting high levels here. Like every single season, Liverpool should be challenging for the Champions League and the Premier League. Underline that part. Yeah. That's like essential. So these players might be having good seasons, but are they good enough to come and play for Liverpool, where if they are on the pitch from the off, the level will not drop? And I've looked at Bakayoko, he looks good. His numbers in the Eredivisie are good. I've looked at him on YouTube as well. I've watched footage of him and stuff like that. But I don't know if he's ready yet for that. Again, you're chatting Liverpool, underline it's Liverpool, mate.
He's 12 goals, wasn't he? I think, in league goals.
Yeah, 12 goals, 9 assists, yeah. Good player, tricky. I don't think he's Premier League fast. I think he's, tricky, mobile and that, but I don't think he's one of them running them behind or anything. I don't know. You're chatting high level basically, and I like that. That's why I maybe are a bit more inclined to lean towards the lads who are doing it as talisman for Premier League sides now, like a Neto and Bramo's doing it for Brentford. Gordon for Newcastle, Elise for Palace. These are proven in England.
Or have done it at the highest Champions League level.
Yeah.
Which is where you get to Kvaratskhelia.
Exactly. Yeah. But you want players who are shouldering the load at a high level, and with the likes of Somerville and Bakayoko, I just think it's maybe a bit. You don't need to take that risk. Almost.
I think Bemo's a decent shout. Some people might kind of, I don't know, turn the nose up a little bit because of where he's playing. But I think he's a fabulous footballer, to be honest. And I think Liverpool will be looking for flexibility, and he offers flexibility massively in that he can go out wide, but he can play centrally as well. And I'm not sure that we'd say he'd do an equally good job through the middle, but I've seen not enough of him to suggest he can operate through the centre and cause teams massive problems.
Great movement.
So movement's electric. So I think someone like that, and the figure being kind of moved, it doesn't feel that massive. I think someone like that is probably going to get a big move this summer, and I think there'll be plenty of top teams sniffing around, because I think he's one who could go big over the next couple of years.
I'm all in on Kudus.
Yeah.
Back-to-back 18-goal seasons. He's got. So I think I'm all in on Kudus.
One thing I said to you though on the text.
Yeah.
Are you viewing him as a wide player though?
Yeah, predominantly, but he can also he can offer you a bit of flexibility as well if you wanted to. Because I think if they're going to, so let's just imagine if it's Diaz out, I think it should be 2 in, and I'd be absolutely fine, with the idea of being the 2 in being one who's flexible and one who predominantly plays right hand side, and sort of see with Salah, the young lad they were linked to in Denmark was interested in the idea that they could just do someone like that at a lower fee, but he's then around the squad. I think Kudus. As I say, it's 2 back-to-back seasons with 18 goals. Fair, I think he's just got that Stardust thing. To your point of underlying Liverpool, that's one of the things where I end up with Kudus a little bit in there. I like him Bueno a lot. I think he could work. I wouldn't be averse if Liverpool ended up doing both of them in a way, in that if the flexibility point that both then offer you. But
I think West Ham might be tricky to get him out given what's going on.
I was going to say, how steep would you go?
But I think you know what the fee is, because I think it's next season's release clause.
85 then?
I think it's 75. It's 85 million euros, 75 million quid. And okay. I think that if you look, they've brought someone in. So they've got Bowen, who plays right wing. That's his best position, Bowen. He can play up front for you, but he plays right wing. And then they brought a lad in from Brazil who's 18, 19, who plays right hand side, cuts in on his left foot. Very similar to Bowen. If I was West Ham, I'd want a centre forward and have the idea of our best side has got Bowen off one flank, a lad in behind, and someone off the, you think about the way in which that squad's going, and then someone up top. That's what I think. And it's interesting they've bought someone who plays the position already. It's one of the few bits of business that's been done.
And he's really their main saleable asset this summer. And
because Paquetá's no longer saleable.
No, exactly. And Lopetegui's going to want to have some money to go and do some moves and to kind of mould the squad as he sees fit, because they are very lopsided at the moment, West Ham. So I'm like you. I think the other thing I like about Kudus as well is that he's used to pressure. Like when he plays for Ghana, he is the star boy. Like all of the pressure is on him, and he is used to delivering in that sense. But I think he could do very well for a Liverpool team.
All right, I like him better though as well, and I think there's others, and obviously there's the main fella, that we can all dream of at some point.
What's going to cost?
I think they'd want upwards of 80.
Yeah, I think that's where it becomes a problem.
Yeah,
I think his wage though is not.
No, it's
he's about 60 grand a week, so that's not that bad. Liverpool could do that.
I think they want upwards of 80, but I think Liverpool could do, and also you're buying him for 10 years. I think if you get Gordon, I think you're getting him for 10 years. The only question then is if he gets a bad injury, but then that's with every footballer.
Who are you shifting on then? Because he again, left hand side, Liverpool.
I was of the view Liverpool were going to shift Diaz on, and my worry now is that with Barcelona having their issues and etc., there's just no viable offer that Diaz wants, and then I think it gets a little bit complicated. I think that, for instance, if you get into a situation where if Diaz doesn't go and you've got to pick between, say, Bueno, Kudus, Gordon, that's not a bad thing. And to the other points that have been made, the idea of being able to move Diaz to the right, then I think it appeals to me. I think if Diaz stays, I do feel as though something's got to be different. Yeah. And I really like the idea of Gakpo getting quality time off the left, and I think there's more than enough games at the highest level for everyone to be able, and so Jota and Nunez to play through the middle as a 9. I've got in my head the idea of Gakpo +1 off the left. If it's Diaz, fine. I think you need there to be, if he's going to keep playing the same way, I think you need a lot of energy and intensity and ball carrying on the right. And I like the idea of Salah and Elliott playing as the 10.
Yeah, I think watching Gakpo for Holland again, and it is only one game, but it was just another reminder he looks very comfortable left hand side compared to sometimes.
I'm watching for Liverpool.
Absolutely. But he doesn't get a lot of time out there, does he? And he ends up kind of playing in lots of different parts of the pitch because it normally is Diaz there. And I just think, watching Gakpo toil a little bit at different times over the course of his Liverpool career, but notwithstanding when he came in, he was really, really good. I do think if you are going to get the best out of him, it does feel like the left hand side's where you're going to do it.
I know we're going to come on to the comparison between club football and international football.
Yeah,
but I think
one's really good and the other one's shite.
The thing that I noticed the most about watching Gakpo for Netherlands yesterday wasn't so much the fact that he was effective on that left-hand channel, it was the fact that he was shooting a lot. He had, I think, about...
Yeah, you messaged me about that.
Yeah, shots. I think he ended the game with 6 shots.
Yeah.
And
4 of them in the first half.
Yeah, 4 of them. And when you think about the fact that they were playing with Memphis Depay, who's kind of like a false 9, and then Xavi Simons, who's more like a 10 playing out wide on the right, he knew that he had the responsibility as being the main goal getter, and he took that responsibility. I don't know whether or not he feels like in the Liverpool team he still has to defer to some of the other forwards, but I think if I'm on the slot, I'm saying to him, nah, you be you in an orange shirt for us, and we'll be fine.
Mo segued in the Euros and how to live it. Grace on Football, at Grace on Football on Substack and on Twitter. Grace Robertson's written a really interesting newsletter today. She's doing one every single day all the way through the Euros, so if you want to check that out, it's worth doing. Its first line was international football, where Wout Weghorst is better than Phil Foden.
It's a great line, that, by the way.
It's a great line, and it's on it, Josh. She goes on to say, she quotes Michael Cox as well, who wrote recently, international football may as well, she says international football may as well be a different sport to club football, and Michael Cox says tactically club and international football are almost 2 separate versions of the same game. You can be charitable and say they're simply different, or you can be realistic and say that international football is some way behind. Grace doesn't want to say that international football is worse, because she really does enjoy it, and it comes through in the writing that she really does enjoy it, but she says it's certainly dumber, it's simpler, and the tactical nuances are lost. There's been so much Liverpool chat and nationwide chat about Trent Alexander-Arnold to the point that it makes me want to go and throw myself in the Mersey. It adds absolutely nothing to anyone's general wisdom, and it's loads and loads of ways in which different people at different levels of the game, from your average supporter all the way up to some of the greatest people ever to play the game, can make themselves sound like, and let's be absolutely crystal clear in this, absolute fucking dickheads. But I want to talk about Foden in that context, because I think that that's now interesting, because it's fresh and it's different and it doesn't feel like you're being protective. So Foden, I think, was one of the best 3 or 4 players in English football last season. No fucking about. That's how good he was. He was the absolute business. But he finds it hard. At international level, he's never really been able to impose himself on the England team as a player of his talent would suggest. And Grace argues in a piece that it's because there's so much more tactical sophistication around what Guardiola's got him doing, and then it creates the platform for him to be able to excel. I think this is a really important point, and I think it's why getting hung up on how players play in the international game, whether positively or negatively, with reference to the highest level of club football, is almost just a waste of time.
Yeah, it is a different sport. I think that's a great way of putting it. It does feel like you're watching kind of Benitez era Premier League, maybe, in terms of just a lack of compactness compared to what we used to see in the Premier League. It's a lot more individual. Obviously, there's fewer attacking patterns in terms of this is how we get into the final third. I think it's very reactive in terms of the scoreline in comparison to what we see at club level. I think at club level, teams have got philosophies. This is how we play regardless of what the scoreline says. International level, anytime you take the lead, you naturally are sitting on that lead and want to protect it. It is not how football to a certain extent, so I get it. But it is completely different, and for that reason, certain players shine at international level who don't shine club level. Pogba comes to mind as a player who dominated, for France, just dictated the play and all that, and because he had more time and space, he had N'Golo Kante sat next to him on like a leash for him almost, go and get me the ball back. I thought we might see elements of Trent doing that for England this tournament, which I was interested to see. But then you've got someone like Foden who quite clearly is benefiting in a tactical sense from what Guardiola's given him, who, what player doesn't. And he hasn't got Guardiola international, he's got Gareth Southgate, who's a bit different, and he seems to get to points in certain games where his substitutes are pre-planned. I find that very frustrating. He seems to have planned his subs before the game, when in reality, you surely make a sub to impact the course of the match.
Yes.
So I find that annoying. But it is very, very different, though. It's a long way of saying it.
It's the algebra for me, Ian, is what Southgate does or doesn't get out of Phil Foden in any way relevant to Pep Guardiola? And I just think the answer to that is no. And I think all the way through, therefore, and this is why I found it difficult when Liverpool people get involved in the discourse as well, why should we think and why should we have thought for years what he does or doesn't get out of, especially Alexander-Arnold, but this summer as well, Gomez, it was relevant to Klopp or should be relevant to Slot? Because we're not sitting here, by the way, analysing what the Portugal coach is or isn't going to get from Diogo Jota. It feels like it becomes swept up, I think, in that conversation around Alexander-Arnold. And to me, I genuinely just don't find it that relevant. I genuinely don't, and I don't mean that in a, you know, I'm up to and including. The only way it's relevant is if Trent believes it. If you see what I mean. Apart from that, I don't think there's any other way in which it's relevant. And I'll say again, I just think that the quality in terms of what it is that you're dealing with, what it is you've got around you, what it is in terms of the coaching. That's not criticising them as coaches. They don't get that much time. I think all of it just makes it feel like, as I say, without sort of talking the whole enterprise down too much, just makes it feel a little bit like it's just not entirely the real thing.
No, I agree. And if you are being fair about it, I do think that the coaching time's a big thing.
Huge.
It's a massive thing in this, and it will apply to lots of the players, and there will be reasons why you don't get the best out of some of these footballers on the international stage, but all of it will come down to kind of structure and coaching time and all that kind of stuff. And the Trent thing, I mean, I'm always intrigued by it because I think it is interesting to see him in the middle of the park. But you're right, I mean, in terms of how you get pressed on the international stage, it's just not the same as what you'd get pressed in the Premier League or in the Champions League, and it's a level or two down, if we're being kind, from the elite level, which is Champions League football. That is the best that you will see served up on a regular basis. It's not international football. I thought Trent did okay, by the way, yesterday for England. He's had a lot of stick, but I think he was always going to get a lot of stick because the narrative was very much set in advance of the game that if it didn't
the
go...
aforementioned dickheads.
Yeah, so if it didn't go particularly well, then it was going to be one person's fault, or he was certainly going to be in the frame, and he was nowhere near the kind of the worst performer on the pitch for England, in my opinion. I think there was one or two things he could have done better, but you know, he is still learning that role, and maybe it allows him to learn it in a kind of way where he wouldn't necessarily get those opportunities at Liverpool because it isn't as frantic, it isn't as kind of on top. He will get more time on the ball, and you come back to the fact that he is probably certainly one of England's most talented footballers with the ball at his feet. I think that can't be denied. He just is a sensational footballer. I am someone who will sometimes criticise him for his defensive ability. I think it's fine and fair to do that. I think if you're not doing that at times, then you are being a little bit generous to him. And I think when he's been at right back, there are moments I'm sure he will look back on and say, I could have done better. I could have put myself back into a situation there where I'm helping the team out.
I'm the argument saying that I think he's been defensively brilliant for 18 months. I don't think that for a second.
The difference is, though, Neil, is that when we look at him, we don't look at other players in the same way. We almost forget about all the mistakes that Trippier's making, or Reece James is making, or even Kyle Walker is making at times. And he's had a really interesting end to the season, Kyle Walker, where he has been at fault for quite a few goals, but it just gets skimmed over. But that doesn't happen to Trent, and that's where I've got loads of sympathy with him, because I'd say he can be poor at times in defensive situations, but he gets more scrutiny than I've ever seen any footballer get. It's unbelievable, the scrutiny he gets. It's ridiculous, and it's unfair, because we are talking about going the other way. One of the most special footballers I think this country's produced in a long time. You know, if you talk about his ability on the ball, it's probably only De Bruyne who you can compare to him in terms of passing ability. He's that good, he's that level. And I think, you know, Neville has been someone who's criticised Trent a lot of times, but he did say on one of the shows yesterday, I think England will look back and regret it if they do not find a way of getting the best out of this footballer. And that is the job of the manager. How do you get the best out of a generational talent? And that's something that the country has failed to do thus far. But there's no doubt, you know, if England are going to be successful, you want to see people like Trent Alexander-Arnold in and around the team. And as I said before, doesn't matter that much to me. I've always been, certainly kind of in the last probably 20 years, very much club over country. I think there was a massive shift. I think it's easy to forget. Maybe in the kind of early 90s, I think a lot of people would get behind the England thing. Silly or 96, it felt like as a country it was a bit different. I don't think it's like that anymore. I think we are very much cut adrift, and I'm fine with it. But for him, you want to see him do well, because I think it means a lot to these lads. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it's a very, very different kind of platform, I think, international football to kind of what we're seeing in the Premier League.
So first of all, Kyle Walker's got the best PR company in the whole world. I would like to buy them and just make them myself a better human. Anyway, you've basically touched on two things I really wanted to dig into. Number one, the coaching time. This is the thing that we always forget about international football. They don't have the time. When you think about the friendlies that we all complain about, because they're frankly an obstruction to our main desire, which is our club. for the managers, it's even worse because they very, very rarely get to have players in the same form and the same kind of energy levels as they were going to have them at the tournament. And this is the thing, watching that England game yesterday, you wonder why they fell off a cliff after 40 minutes, because they're all knackered at the end of a very, very, very long season. And we can talk about the fact that everyone's got long seasons. We have it worse than everybody. In England, it's a lot more intense than everyone else has it. So the manager never really gets players as he wants them to work with at any point right up until just before a tournament. This is why he's been leaning on players who we've been telling him is rubbish for so long, the Harry Maguires, and this is why the defence is not... in Gareth Southgate's defence hasn't changed, his back five hasn't changed from like 3 tournaments, because he knows how they all work together, and that kind of chemistry is really important to him. And so you think about... I
think all this is very fair.
Yeah, it is. And I think when you're thinking about international football in general, it's being able to overcome that, which is kind of one of the things I love about it. And then you look at the teams who are successful, it's normally the teams who've got players who've, or at least aspiring. So you mentioned France earlier. Griezmann, Giroud, Mbappe, Kante, I believe, has been picked again. And he's playing in Saudi Arabia. So these things all matter massively. The second point you mentioned is about Trent Alexander-Arnold and playing in midfield for England, and how the fact that he's basically doing Arne Slot a favour, Southgate here, because he's learning on his dime. And if you think about the way that Southgate's done this, he first did it, I think it was in 2021 that he first played in midfield. I think it was against Andorra and then against Malta. So he started it in games where England are going to dominate the ball, England are going to win regardless. So if he goes wrong, then there's no harm. And then he's kind of making it a little bit more, and a little bit more pressure, and a little bit more pressure. And now we've got serious pressure in terms of tournament football. This is great for Liverpool because we get to find out if he can really do it.
But I don't think we do. So this is my problem.
I was going to ask that, yeah.
No, but I do. Because if you think about it...
I think we get to find out whether or not there's vague possibilities. But I just don't think it's the same.
Not now, not in the group stage. But I think when we're getting into the knockout phases, it will be. Because all the things you're talking about, the fact that the lack of pressing and all that kind of football, when it gets to the knockout stage, when it gets to the tight football, then yes, I do think. And if you look at the way he played in that game yesterday, it wasn't really him playing as a centre midfielder. It was basically him finding space, like he does for Liverpool, in that right midfield channel. Drifting out there, finding space and trying to dictate the play. Now, what we're going to see over the course of this tournament is when we play against better teams, they're going to try and counteract that. And we get to see how he deals with that. And that's the information that we're going to take. In terms of intensity, you might say it's not going to be the same as Champions League football. But when you're playing the knockout game rounds of the Euros, you're playing quarterfinals, semi-finals of Euros, all of the players you're playing against are Champions League footballers.
There's an emotional onus. Go on, Josh.
It's difficult, isn't it? I think he was all right yesterday. I must be honest, I expected a bit better. I expected better for those reasons we've said about international football, where you're kind of under pressure less. You have more time on the ball to dictate and stuff like that. But I don't know how much you can take from it in terms of his club level, because I think you can take elements of it, like say for example receiving the ball with your back to a man. If you don't do that particularly well at international level, that's going to be harder in the Premier League and in the Champions League. And there was 1 or 2 moments where he struggled with that. I also think when it comes to his defensive game, people criticising what he offers on the defensive side, I think it's justified, but I also think he's just generally a bit of a problem when it comes to his, he just has no chill. Sometimes, mate, you just... we had the ball at one point, we had the lead. Playing with the ball, we had about, 10, 15 passes or something like that. Trent gets the ball middle of the park, and he just tries to hit Harry Kane with a long pass, and Foden goes like, what are you doing?
No, but
and there wasn't elements of that, though.
The flip side of that, though, is that there was a period for the first 20 minutes where England couldn't get out. They couldn't have the ball. And the only time they got out of the pitch is when he played exactly one of those balls to Kieran Trippier in the left wing. And they were able to keep the ball in the final third of Serbia for about 5 minutes. And that was the only time they did it in the whole game. And it's because of one of those passes. So I think he is being told that is what you have to do in his team. And the other thing...
But that's one of the reasons why I don't think it's transferable. Because you don't know know whether or not what he is or isn't being told. So certainly from our point of view as a viewer / analyzer for things like this, you don't know what it is he's being told. So if he's being told, for instance, you get the opportunity there, you hit Kane. Foden could not like it because Foden might be thinking, well, if I was playing for Pep Guardiola, that wouldn't be going there, that'd be coming to me.
Yeah.
So you can't. But my point here is, my argument, I'm not saying who's right or wrong. I'm saying you can't know. Whereas you watch the way a side plays on a regular basis, and you can say, that was the plan.
Yeah, no, granted, but I think there are other things that part of the midfield stuff that we can translate that he did well. So, for example, he completed 100% of his tackles, by the way, in that game yesterday. And he made 2 vital interceptions in the middle of the pitch, one of which where he had to chase back. A guy had beaten him, chased it back, he got the ball back and then transferred it forward.
We should have scored off one of them.
There was the one where he intercepted it and passed it on to Kyle Walker, where Kyle Walker messed up the shot. That was from him making a defensive action in the centre of the pitch. And no one mentioned any of those things. But when the ball bounced off his shins and went to Mitrovic and they nearly scored, no one forgot that part. And this goes back to the fact of people having their minds set before the game is kicked off about what they want to see. So when something goes wrong, they all jump on it, but they miss all of the good factors from it. I do think, genuinely, there are going to be parts of this, him playing in midfield against poorer opposition, against very good opposition, and later in the tournament, where Arne Slot's going to be able to really sit down and say, okay, can I do this with this guy? Can he work with it? And then go back to what you said previously, Neil, about him and how he feels about it. Because if this has kind of made him feel like, I can do this, I can be a midfielder, I want to be a midfielder, but the manager doesn't agree, then it's an issue.
I think,
but also what the manager might be looking for might be completely different in terms of how much work you've got to put in, pressures, so on, that you've got to do in midfield that you don't have to do at the back.
That's where I think that's where it's difficult. I think there will be some elements, but it will come down to, does Southgate pick Trent in the latter stages of the tournament in midfield? He might not. It depends how maybe the next few games go. But if you were suddenly, like if he's in areas where he's taking the ball in the half turn in the middle of the park and he's getting pressurised by some of France's top boys, I think that is useful to see. How does he handle it in those moments where he is on the half turn? He's not really used to doing that as much as a fullback, and he's then got to kind of deal with one or two kind of just conversing on him. That feels like it's useful. But in some of the group stages where he is getting loads and loads of room, like I couldn't believe how deep Harry Kane was coming at times as well, which wasn't really helping Trent, because if he is looking for that long ball, and Southgate had referenced one of the reasons he wanted him in there was because of his range of passing. But you've got forward lads dropping in so deep where Trent had no one to hit. And at times he did hit Saka, and I thought he kind of showcased his ability in different moments. But, England now got to play anything like Liverpool play.
You want the last word?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just think you can touch on what Southgate might be telling him not to do or to do or whatever, but I do think his use of the ball generally is always pretty much the same, regardless of where he's playing on the pitch, who he's playing for, what colour the shirt is. He still has that way about him where when you're weighing up a pass and you've got the risk versus the reward, he sees the reward constantly, and the appreciation for the risk, I don't think is high enough. And I think that epitomises why he's such a dangerous player if you're playing against him, but it also captures why he can hurt you going the other way. It's not so much the winning the tackles, the interceptions and that. It's also just he accelerates the game sometimes when no one else expects him to, and you lose the ball, you're wide open and that. I think that's what's dangerous about him. That's what you have to accommodate, and sometimes if you can't accommodate that, it's tricky. And when I was saying he was all right in his performance, what I also wanted to add to that was just, I don't know how much England's system was responsible for that though, because I didn't like what Southgate did, if I'm honest. I think playing Foden on the left and basically saying to him, go and do what you want, lad, I don't think it really works that well. And then playing Trippier as a left back who's right-footed and offered no width either. It was completely lopsided system where everyone's clogged in the area that Trent wants the ball. So I don't think that benefits them. But yeah, he's a bit of a conundrum though, isn't he? I think in the nicest possible way, he's definitely a problem that you've got to get to the not a problem, a puzzle maybe that you've got to solve.
Okay, excellent stuff. Thank you very much to Josh, to Mo and to Ian. Talk loads of stuff up all the way through that. We're going to have gutters all the way through the week talking about where the market's up to for Liverpool. Do subscribe to the Anfield Wrap, download the app, etc, etc. We put our tour dates on for the pre-season bits and pieces, and Mo's doing something on Monday in Philadelphia. Quick.
Yes. The LFC crossover, big show of talking about Liverpool FC and talking about Philly sports. Monday 27th of July, Plough on the Stars. Come down, be there, be square.
Marvellous stuff. See you later.